Hello and welcome everyone to the Raybox Studio Show, and my name is Krista. And tonight we have a guest who's going to come along and talk to us all about freelancing. So she has been in the business for, I think right now, probably more than 12 years. And she has a lot of experience in this field because her business connects freelancers to clients out there, and she and her team manages projects, but at the same time she really takes care of the freelancers who works for her. So without much further ado, let me bring on Jayce Tham of Creatives at Work Private Limited.
Hi everyone, I'm Jayce. Hi Crystal, thanks for the introductions.
So Jayce, we were going to talk about freelancing today, right? So way before we went live, we want to talk about freelancing 101. But before we get into freelancing 101, briefly, could you let us know what your business is about and what you do with freelancers and for freelancers?
Sure, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here tonight. Thanks Crystal for the opportunity, and to all the audiences out there, good evening to you. My name is Jayce. I'm actually from a media agency called Creatives at Work, currently based in Singapore. What we do is we actually connect creative freelancers to potential business owners. So basically, we provide two main type of business activities. One is in terms of matchmaking. So that is pretty much like a recruitment services function where we actually help our client to source, identify, and recommend the most appropriate freelancers to work on our client's project, whether it's writing, designing, social media, digital marketing, etc., video productions, right? The whole scope and the whole range of creative services. Another, I would say, business activities that we are very much involved in is what we call the project management function. Actually, in fact, since COVID started till now, we actually see a steady increase in the demand, right? And also more and more clients are actually moving towards adopting our project management services. So basically, under project management service that we provide, what we do for our client is we basically help them to build a team of freelance pool, and then we will manage the freelance pool from conceptualization all the way to delivery. So the difference between matchmaking and project management is really in terms of the number of skill sets involved and the number of freelancers that's been involved. So usually the project that we manages are usually bigger budget projects or project that span over a longer period of time, and it actually involve more than one freelancers. So we as Creative at Works will come on board as a project managers to help our client to manage the entire rollout of the projects lah. And we actually get to select the freelancers that we work with. Of course, in terms of the commission project, right, that's our, I would say, bread and butter, lah, right? In that sense, that's what pay us. But we are also right involved, and I would say increasingly more into other areas. So I would say the one key areas that we are actively involved in right now as well is in terms of training. So we actually provide training workshops to freelancers or freelancers related topics. So from your freelancing 101 to mentorship programs, and we are going to launch a freelancing bootcamp that actually looks at upskilling and upskill, right, the freelancers as well. So training is a very big part of what we do. And other than training, we also went into original content creations ourselves, right? So one of it is actually we run a podcast called the Freelance Creative Exchange, right? So basically, the podcast is everything and anything about freelancing in, I would say, in this part of the world. So every episode, we actually invite freelancers to talk about their challenges, you know, their wishes, what they hope that they could do more, how they overcome their challenges, and what they hope to do coming up next. The recent season, so we have been running things for the last 2 years, right? The recent seasons that we have actually just launched and is still going on is called Freelancers Confessions. So basically, that seasons actually looks
That
at
sounds
us.
that sounds really interesting.
Thank
Confession.
you, thank you. Yes, yes. So we basically, you know, take stories for our freelancers, and then we
Hmm.
kind of change it a little bit. Of course, you know, change the name, you know,
Is it horror
change the
stories?
clients.
Like
Yeah,
working
it's
with
really like
horrible
exactly.
clients,
You're
is it?
right. You're right. It is. So it's like working with client from hell or working with freelancers from hell, type of stories. Yeah, so yeah, that has been a pretty nice journey for us as well. So we kind of quite happy as well that this season the season was doing quite well by itself. So other than podcasting, we are also into we published a book last year, really thanks to COVID, which actually made us focus on coming out with the book. So the book is called the business of freelancing. So it was published right last year, I think in October, by World Scientific Publishing. So if you were to go to the Amazon bookstore, you should be able to find it there. We are currently working on an audiobook version, so it should be released quite soon as well. So if you prefer to have the audio version, you can choose to get the audio audio version instead of the actual book. So we're
So
also
you
doing
have
a
a lot of things
documentary
going
right now.
on.
We
You've
have a
done a
lot of
lot.
things going on.
You have a
Yes,
lot of
yes.
things.
We have a lot of things going on, right? So but the underlying I would say mission, that is the same, right? If you look at whatever that we do, although we have a lot of things going on, but the we only have one key mission, right? And that is to how can we actually help each and every freelancers to focus on what they are doing and to be a freelancers for as long as they want, right? So from providing job opportunity, that's our matching and project management services, right, to equipping them with the necessary knowledge, right? That's the training part of it, right? And then of course providing them with resources, right? So that's the podcast, that's our documentary, that's
And
our
your book.
book. Yes.
Yeah. And the trainings and the boot camps.
The trainings and the book
Whatever
camps,
you
and
have.
we're also running the Podcast Asia Festival that's actually coming out in December as well.
Yeah.
So all this brings back right to new opportunity that we see for freelancers in the region, or actually even broader than that, right? Self-employed person, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily just freelancers. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's backtrack a bit. So I want to say a couple of hellos to the people who joined us. Hi Michelle. Hi Shamila. And if you just joined us, put in the comments where you're from. I know many of you are from Malaysia, but maybe you're from Singapore. I don't know, because we're talking to Jayce Tham, who's from Singapore, right? So Malaysia, Singapore, pretty much like cousins like that, right?
We
You can
are,
say that. Back,
and we are so near.
yeah, we're literally we share a lot of things in common.
Mhm.
So put it in the comments and let us know where you're watching this from, and welcome if you're just joined us. So the key thing is, let's start with the definition before we even go deeper, because people have definitions, their own definitions about freelancing or being a freelancer. So what is a freelancer? Who is a
Is that
freelancer?
question for me? That's a question for
Yes,
me, is it?
yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
But
I
also
see.
for the audience.
Okay,
Okay, so for
right.
Jayce, that's the question for Jayce. Who or what is a freelancer? But also for the rest of you who are watching, put in the comments who or what is a freelancer to you, in your opinion, because we have so
Mm,
many definitions. So Jayce,
mm.
you go first.
Okay, so for us, right, our freelancers definition is actually quite simple. So anyone who is actually working for yourself, right, or providing a service or even providing a product for yourself, that to us is actually a freelancer. So we kind of use freelancers, self-employed person quite interchangeably, right? Although a lot of people actually or rather we have got some feedback, right, that they didn't like the word freelancers because it sound like some negative connotation associated with the word freelancers. So yeah, so we have used freelancer, self-employed person. Actually, if you want to say a more formalized definition or a word that represent this group of workers, right, in Singapore context. So under the Singapore's Ministry of Manpower, they actually call us the own account workers, right? So because you work for your own account in that sense. So yeah, so basically there's actually quite a wide variety. Some even call it the gig workers, right? So but to us is as long as you're working for yourself, right, you make your own judgment call as to you have the freedom to choose the work that you want to do, the project that you want to do, then that to us is actually a freelancer.
Okay. So that is good to know, because we always I always like to start with definition, because sometimes where what I say and what you say, we think we are talking about the same thing. Actually, we may not be talking about the same thing at all. So great that you let us know what a freelancer is. And then you just now you mentioned, right? So people have a negative perception of freelancer. Why is this so?
Well, I guess because freelancers start with free, right? So a lot of people I mean,
Misconception of
those who
free, right?
doesn't, yeah, correct. Those who doesn't know the definition of freelancers will always feel that okay, freelancers is free. Freelancers are people who probably cannot find a full time job. Freelancers are not your skilled workers, for example. There's probably just hands and legs. So I guess um the negative perception comes from you know in the past, right, where you actually have limited choices of what you want for your career, right? And if people were to choose freelancing back then, when it's still not so popular and not so possible, it seems like a wrong choice. Right. But I think fast forward to today, right? Actually, in fact, what we are seeing in Singapore is that we have a bigger percentage of people who want to be freelancers by choice, right? Because they want to have the lifestyle, they want to be their own boss, they want to have the decisions to be able to make their own career choice, right? And instead of following the previous generations of working for someone else and have a very structured, I would say, career path. So I guess the world has changed, or what we call the future of work, right, has kind of arrived. And of course, I think COVID has actually accelerated that, by at least 3 4 times, especially in this part of the world where it forces everyone to work from home.
Yeah. So then when we were backstage, right, we were talking about this um, because today's title is profitable freelancing.
Mm,
So we're going to talk about money. And money is something that both of us feel that a lot of people, and we felt, right? Okay, so correct us if we are wrong. If we're watching this, and let us know whether we're right or wrong, right? We say that Asians usually are a little bit more hesitant to talk about money. And especially when we're talking about rates. I think rates or payment or anything related to money is a bit of a tricky issue for many of us. I don't know, maybe because we haven't grown up talking openly about money, or it's something like, oh, we just try to hide it somewhere. So what is that what do you think is that fear, and how should freelancers approach this if they really just say right now someone says, okay, I want to be a freelancer, but someone's going to ask me about my rate sooner or later? What am I supposed to do, or how can I
right.
make it easier to talk about money with my
Yeah,
client?
yeah. Right. You're right. That's a good starting point, I guess.
Mm,
Okay, we were talking about that, right? Like this is actually one of the things that I feel a lot of I primarily work a lot with creative freelancers. So probably that's the boundary and that's the parameters, right? So a lot of, I only operate in the creative sector. So there might be other sectors that I'm not so familiar, like for example real estate, or something else. So whatever that I'm sharing right now was really focusing on this group of freelancers like in the creative services. But of course, already with creative services, it's actually quite broad already, right? With designing, writing, social media, digital marketing, is really the whole wide range, right? So this is actually a common issue that I find a lot of or rather a lot of our freelancers, right, even including myself, right, when I first started, right, you always feel uncomfortable talking about money, right? And today we are talking about profitable freelancing, right? So the first question to ask yourself is, if I'm uncomfortable to talk about money, right, then how can I make money, right? So the first thing to, probably not the first, but one of the first of the many things that you need to overcome when you first start your freelance career is really to think about money, right? If you want to have a sustainable freelance career, right, the first thing you need to be sure is that it can make you money so that you can actually sustain yourself, right? I've come across a lot of creative freelancers, especially, okay, now maybe I don't say who, but kind of it's kind of stereotype, but you probably know who I'm talking about, right? That there will be people who actually say that, oh, I do this for the love of arts, for example, right? I do this for the love of passion, right? But at the end of the day, yes, you can have your passion, you can love to do something, but if it doesn't make you money, right, then it's not a career to me, right? That is actually a hobby, right? So I think those are some of the things that you need to differentiate, right? And the first question to ask yourself is, can I make money with this? Right, then that brings us back to the point today. If I don't know how much should I charge, if I don't know my rate, right? If I don't know what is the minimum, right, that worth my time, I would say, working on the things I'm working, then then why would your customers or why would your client trust you with the project, or why would they actually know your rates, right? I have some freelancers who say, never mind, the client will know, they just pay me the market rate law. But if you yourself don't even know what is your market rate, then how do you expect another person to know? And does
Yeah.
it mean that if they say that I feel your market rate is just $20, and are you going to accept it? Right. Of course, there are some cases I must say that, okay, okay, maybe this is a passion project, right? I'm working with my friends, and therefore I'm willing to lower my rate. I mean, that's a different stories, right?
Mm.
But I think it's the basis of where you want to come from, right? If you don't even know your minimum, you cannot negotiate, right? Those are part and parcel of running your own business, right? You need to be able to tell people, what's your time is worth, right? You need to be able to tell people, you need to be able to negotiate, right? Whether is it your fee, or whether is it the project that you're going to work on, right? So those are part and parcels of what you need to do as a business owner. So if you actually feel um a bit embarrassed, right, to talk about your rate, and you are hoping that someone will mention it, that person will never say it. They will never, want to pay you more than they can. In fact, most of the time, even if you say your rate, they will try to bargain down. I mean, at least that's
Yeah.
our experience lah. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
there are some freelancers out there, that have clients who say, "Oh, yeah, I'm willing to pay you this." But in our experience, most of the time, right, the
Yeah.
client will try to bargain down, right? So if you don't even have a minimum, if you don't know how much is your minimum rate, then it becomes very difficult. And it shouldn't be the last thing. What we find, right, is that it shouldn't be the last thing that you talk about it. It should in fact be the first thing that you want to talk about it, right? If you're serious about this business, if you're serious about making it profitable, if you really want to make money, right, then you should not leave this at the back of your mind, right? If you don't mention it, nobody will mention it, right? And if you don't say it first, at the end of the day, it's just going to waste each other's time,
Yeah.
right?
Because you'll be
So
talking about the project and then
exactly.
realize that, oh, at the end of the day, the client doesn't have that money for that project, but you've just talked 2 hours about
Yep.
exciting things to do, right?
Yep.
And
Or you have spent a lot of time working on the best proposal that you can put together, and then realize that actually the proposal the client cannot work on, they cannot do it anyway because they doesn't have the budget.
yeah, yeah. So it should be like we talk about the rates, or at least a baseline kind of fee or whatever it is that you want to say. Your minimum rate starts from, how much. So at least people have an idea, right? So right now, I want to also bring up a comment. Michelle asks or says this.
Mm,
I think less of being afraid to talk about money, but more of hesitancy and
yeah.
struggling with valuing oneself. Great comment,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Yep.
Thanks for putting that in. So, how? Okay, then if this is really just say like this is what Michelle is saying right there. How do we start valuing ourselves?
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
people have asked you this a lot, right?
Actually, surprisingly, not really, right? A lot of question that we got, right, are probably, oh, how should I calculate my rate,
Mm.
right? So we got that question so much so, right, that we decided to work on a
Mm.
freelance rate calculator, and it's actually on our website. So if you go to our website under resources, you'll be
Mm.
able to find this freelancers rate calculator that you can roughly calculate your rates lah. But I must say, of
Great
course,
resource. Great resource.
thank you. But of course, we are basing it a lot on Singapore terms. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it might affect the rate in a way, right? But I guess at least, right, you have that ballpark figure lah, roughly,
Yeah.
what does it comes to. But I think that is a great question for Michelle, and that is something that we always advocate, and hence we decided to actually come up with a freelancing bootcamp which focuses more on really valuing yourself, understanding yourself, right, and scaling out your business, right? I think one of the key things that we always like to recognize is that the work that we do has a value, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
because we are not confident in communicating that value, and
Mm.
in some cases we are unable to quantify the value, and hence it becomes very difficult to convince a client why they need to pay us this, right, and not say $2, right, or someone from say another part of the world,
Mm.
costs and you cost 10 times more than the other person. So because the value part of it is something that is so difficult to, well, I won't say difficult, but you have to overcome, right, a certain challenges in order to define that value, right? And that's what makes it so valuable, right? So, and that I would say is one of the key differentiating factors between successful freelancers and probably freelancers who are struggling, right? Is
Mm.
whether you understand the value that you are going to translate. And going back to Michelle's question about struggling with value, right? I think that is very normal, right? It's just part and parcel of your freelancing career, right? So if you look at, or if I look at all my freelancers, right? Everyone's journey is different, right? Some is more successful than the others. Some actually try harder than the others, right? I guess it's all a matter of actually going through the cycle of understanding the kind of project you are suitable for and understanding yourself. The more you know what you can do, the more project you work on, you become more sure of the value. That's where you can actually then start to struggle less about the value that you can bring to your clients, right? Because one of
Mm.
the things that I see a lot of young freelancers struggle with, right, is consistency in their work,
Okay.
right? So in
How,
order
how
to
how
know your
how how does
value,
that mean? Consistency means what? Means like,
that means, okay, maybe like this project A, I do very well, the client's very happy.
mm,
But then come project B, right? Somehow the
mm,
client is not happy with me, right? And then the client didn't want to pay me because of that. So it's in terms of the work performance, it's not
ah,
consistent, right?
okay.
So as a or rather what we see from some of the characteristic of the successful freelancers is once you get to a consistency level as a freelancer in terms of providing your service, right? That is where you actually reach the right point of your value, right? So it's not easy, like what Michelle said, right? But it is a process that you need to go through, right? Some discover it faster than the others. Probably some can discover it within a few months, right? Some may take a few years to find out. But the key is really accumulating the experience, right? Working, showing your consistent output, right? And of course, at the end of the day, is understanding the market lah. So I think it's a few factors at play. That when all these are aligned, so in a way, it's like when the stars are aligned, then you'll be
The
able
profit
to,
happens.
yeah, the profit happen and you'll be able to find your value. But actually, I hope profit can happen a bit faster lah for anyone.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that we always tell a new freelancers who first started, right, is that you of course you need to understand the challenges and all this, right? But at the same time, right, you should actually always have an emergency fund, right? Or for anyone, right, who is considering whether you want to go into freelancing, I would say that you at least need, right, to have at least 6 to 8 months of saving, right, monthly expenses equal to your monthly expenses. So 6 to 8 months of savings, um, of your living expenses. Then I would say at that time, then you are ready, right, to start your freelance career. Because you have to bear in mind that when you start your career, it's not like, okay, I start today, I will have business, right, and I will
Mm,
get paid. Right, it
yeah,
is a cycle as well, right? You need to go through the marketing yourself, telling people about yourself, like eventually landed a job, and then when you do the job, after you complete the job, then you need to give invoice, and then after that, maybe 30 days, 60 days, some even 90 days, right?
yeah.
Before the payment comes in. So it will take a couple of months, right? Before you actually see your first paycheck coming in. So you need to think about how are you going to survive in those few months, right?
Mm.
That you didn't have clients or
Any
you didn't have
incoming
any income. Yeah,
incoming sales?
exactly. And I think COVID is a very good example to all of us, right? I mean,
Mm,
COVID took more than 6 months
yeah,
technically, especially for the creative freelancers, right? I would say some sectors, lah, not all.
mm,
Some, of course, is booming, but in that sense, so you have to make sure that you have emergency fund, or if you don't have, right, you have to try to build out your emergency fund as fast as possible. Because can you imagine if you are already dealing with so many things, right? Wow, I need to negotiate with clients. I need to look for clients. I need to do my
mm,
job. I need to do billing, right? And then on top of
yeah,
that, you need to worry about where is your next dollar to come in to pay your rent. That
yeah,
kind of stress level is so high, right? So if you want to be successful, focused, right,
yeah.
then I would say that minimize the challenges, right? If you know that there's certain things that will definitely happen, right, then try to minimize it from happening. So if you have 6 months of saving, 8 months of saving, at least I can survive, right, for 8 months, say for example, without any money coming in, right? Then
Mm,
you can actually then focus your energy on pushing and doing your best job,
okay.
right? So you usually will not be performing your best if you have so many things going at the back of your mind, right? Oh,
Yeah. You
I
also
cannot pay
worry
my
about
phone bill.
whether you'll be kicked out of your apartment.
Your apartment, yeah, exactly. I cannot pay my phone bill, my
Yeah.
internet, especially for a lot
Yeah.
of freelancers, right? They needed internet
Yeah.
and all this. So try to minimize that, right? So that you will keep yourself focused, right, on churning out the best work for your clients. I think that is actually a very important factors that actually can break or make your career lah.
Okay. So now I'm going to quickly just welcome those who have just joined us. Thank you for tuning in. I want to share the resource that Jayce mentioned just now. Find out your rates, because some of you, I think we started off by talking about money because we really want to make it valuable for you for this session. So how do you know your rates? Go and find out with their calculator at this link here. Go there and check it out, because a lot of us have like maybe thinking of how do you charge, whether you're going to do extra research here and there. Save you time, go to this link and find out more.
So
Okay.
I
So
yeah.
mm,
Sorry. So
sorry,
just
go
to
ahead.
add, right? No problem. So just to add, right? There's actually really many ways of calculating your rates. So
Mm,
what we have actually used for this freelance calculator was probably one of the most common way that is based on costs, right? So
mm,
so you calculate, how much money you need to survive in a month, and then you then
yeah.
divide by the number of billable hours you have, and then you get your monthly hourly rate, right? But
Mm,
other than this, what I wanted to emphasize was there's actually other format or other formula that you can use to
mm,
calculate your rate as well. So we are not saying that this is the best way to calculate your
yeah.
rate,
Yeah.
but this is probably one of the easiest for you to start with, right? Of course, another one that I think we also briefly spoke about it, Michelle brought it out, is value-based pricing.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
Actually, in fact, I would say you can start off from a cost-based pricing, which is what we have actually come out with the calculator for. But eventually, your goal is to move toward value-based pricing, right? You should price yourself based on the value that you can bring to your client instead of how much it costs you to survive, right?
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the things that I just want to add. There's actually really a lot of ways. Of course, another way is market rate lah. So you just base it on
Yeah.
market rate, but market rate like whose rate, right?
Yeah. Whose market, right?
Yeah, whose market?
Whose market you talking about? The client's market or the freelancer's market,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
quite funny, somehow, right? Everyone would think that there's this market rate. But actually, yeah, like what you say, like whose market, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone will ask also, so even some of my clients, they will ask me, so what is the market rate for designers? Right. Then I will like, market rate for designers? Then of course I will never give a, I mean, or rather, it's difficult for us to give a range, even a range, right? Because to us, is we dealt with a wide variety of freelancers, wide scope, right? So it really
Yeah.
depends. The market rate will depend on your experience,
Yeah.
will depend on what the scope of work, right? And it will also depends on your expertise, right? You may have some expertise that other people don't have, right? And hence
Yeah.
your market rate should be higher, right? It should reflect that kind of work that you can do that not everyone can do. So it's actually a struggle actually. I also don't know who come up with this definition of market rate. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just yeah.
It's just that everybody says, right, market rate, market
Yeah.
rate. So everybody just copy that phrase, like free market rate. But what's the market
Yeah,
rate? We don't know. Now,
exactly.
right now, I also want to bring up some comments, very interesting comments. So, Sharmila, she says, from my experience, when I niche down instead of being a generalist, it increased my value as a freelancer. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really great tip, because a lot of people tend to start up being very general about everything, and they
Yep.
do everything, right? But I think the key thing that we know also, even for businesses and all that, the moment you start to be really specific and to really know what kind of work you can do for what kinds of customers, that makes your marketing a lot easier, and people can really identify you with the kind of work that you can do for them. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I mean totally agree with what Shamila say, right?
Yeah.
But again, then I must emphasize that is where it's so difficult, right? To
Yeah.
find your value, right? Because it's not
Yeah.
like, I want to go into freelancing today and this is my value, right? It's something that it comes from experience, it
Mm,
comes from talking to people, right? It
yeah.
comes from getting actual project deliver and seeing the value yourself, right? So it's
Yeah.
not something that can happen overnight. So to all I mean new freelancers out there, right? Of course it doesn't mean that you need to niche down the day that you start freelancing, right?
Yeah.
What we are seeing is some freelancers actually started so niche that it becomes very difficult for
Mm,
them to actually move into another area as well. So for example, a 3D designer, for example, right?
Yeah.
um so that's one thing about the value. So second thing that I want to talk about, this point, right, about niching down, is also a marketing technique for freelancers. Personally, I feel, right, because I think back then, right, when social media was not so rampant, right, so a lot of us, we keep thinking about, okay, where should I find my clients, right?
Mm,
But actually now, in today's current environment, with social
mm,
media, with everyone, right, on social
mm,
media, everyone has a mobile, right, everyone is
mm,
into the different social media platform. The questions that I think freelancers should ask themselves, right, is
mm,
how can the client find me, right?
mm.
So that
Good
is
one.
where, yeah, that is where the niche comes down, right? Because
Yeah.
you want to attract the customers that you want to work for, right?
Yeah.
And hence you need to constantly have a social presence that convince people that you are the person that they are looking for in the event they're looking for you,
Okay. So
right?
how can they do
So,
that? Obviously
well,
I know the answer, but well, how should they really start doing it? Because a lot of people still, I don't know, a lot of people still are a little bit like say, oh, I'm low profile, I don't want to do this. But when you're out there in the job market or even looking for clients, you have to really raise that profile, right?
yeah. So one of the topics that we actually talk about quite extensively in all our workshops, right, is really personal branding. I mean, of course, I think it's easier to say than to be done,
To do
right?
it.
Yeah, to do it, right? But again, if you don't do it, right, nobody is going to do it for you. Right, nobody is going to tell another person, oh, how good you are. I mean, maybe there is a word of mouth. That's what we always do, right? We always say that,
Yeah.
okay, or rather, what we always hear from our freelancers is that they always do it by word of mouth, right? While this is one of the way, right, of course, right, but if you are able to build up personal branding, if you are able to actually, use your characteristic, use what you are good with, right, to tell
Mm,
the world, leveraging on social media to build up a presence, right, and that in a way you uses that to actually attract customers to you, right? So you don't have um, to constantly go out there, right, and look for them. So I would say it's a two-ways approach. Then back to your question about how do we do that, right? That is
yeah.
actually a simple answer, a simple
Mm.
answer to it. But when you are doing it, it becomes very difficult, right? So it's about choosing the right social media platforms, right, to build out your presence, right? It could be any, right? Really depending on how well you know yourself, what services you provide, right? Whether who are your key customer segment, right?
But
Then I think from there,
if they start out not knowing anything, for instance,
mm,
someone who is just a brand new freelancer, right? So if they start out not knowing anything, how do they start putting the word out there? Of course, they can start their Facebook page, they can start their LinkedIn page, of course, they can even start their website, right? So that at least people know a little bit about what they offer and how and who they offer it to. But usually, I would say that at the early years of anyone starting anything, whether it's a business or not, it's really hard to get the word out there.
mm.
In your experience, what has worked and what have you seen that has worked for your freelancers, like when they're really newbie lah, totally newbie? How can they actually, get the ball rolling?
Right. Okay. So I would say that now is actually quite or rather, at least what we see from a lot of the younger freelancers, right? Right. Having a website, right, is a must, right? I won't. Okay. Maybe it's not so much of a website. It doesn't have to be in the form of a website, right? You could use your Instagram. You can use your Facebook. You can use even TikTok, right? But I guess it's probably a place where you actually actively engage with, right, and put in your portfolio. So I think the thing about first the thing about young freelancers who are starting out, right, is to actually tell people what you can do and what you cannot do. Maybe not so much of what you cannot do, but focuses on what you can do and what you want to do. Right. So even if you actually didn't have a ready project, right? But if you have a social media channels that you want to build out your profile, say for example LinkedIn in this case. So LinkedIn is actually a very popular, I would say, social media platforms for a lot of the freelancers, right? So even if you have no existing project to shout about, right, there's nothing stopping you from posting your own work onto the LinkedIn platform on your LinkedIn account, right? As you do more, as you talk about a specific topic more, right, that's where people start to discover you,
Mm.
right? So I think discoverability is actually one of the key, I would say, um, important factors for any freelancers, right? How can you get discovered, right? How can people notice you, right? So either you reach out to your connections, right? Or you try to talk about topics or leverage on people's trending topics, right? So that more people will see you in their feed. So more people become aware that you are actually out there, right? Um, so all this should be the basis of how you want to build up your social media presence and your actually and your profile, right? So I would say think about what type of project you want to do, right? And then communicate your value using your social media presence. And it can be anything. It can be Instagram, right? It can be Facebook, right? Really depend on where you think most of your clients are coming from.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to pull up another comment. This is by Sun Myo. Each of the job is a marketing activity in itself.
Mm.
How we do anything is how we do everything by T. Harv Eker. Yeah, that's a very famous phrase by T. Harv Eker.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep. Agree. I totally agree, right? I think what I actually wanted to add to this, right, is I think this is how we do anything is how we do everything. I think the thing that I actually wanted to add is one of the key phrase, right, from Amazon founder uh Jeff Bezos. So he also used to say, right, you are actually who you are when people are not watching you,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So it's really about, you, right? So you are your true self when people are not watching you. So do you also deliver that kind of quality when people are not watching, right? You know how some freelancers, because of time issues, because of time constraints, right, they could cut corners, right? I mean, this is human nature lah, right?
Yeah.
And we thought that nobody knows, right? But actually someone along the line will actually find out, right, if you try to cut corners and things like that. So I think that is actually a very important considerations as well, right? And really each job is a marketing activities in itself because it showcases you. So that is where, when we were earlier talking about value, right? If you treat every job, right, as the last job that you have, right, and the output is consistent, that is your value. So you
Mm.
found the value that you have already.
Okay. So now, Jace, let's talk about some examples of successful freelance projects that you've managed. What would you term as the ideal or the the perfect kind of job versus the horror horror stories?
Actually, to
What
be
worked
frank,
and what didn't work? Yeah.
wow, that is actually a very, very big question. Actually, the perfect projects, right, to
Yeah.
us, is always working on our own projects.
Okay.
Because you know how it is working on client's project, right? Because, but
Yeah.
of course, there's nothing right or wrong because it's different objective. We come from different um, end of the spectrum, right? The client has different perspective, right? So if you are a creative, right, you will very often, you know, have to compromise because the ultimate aim of the client probably is not to churn out the best work but to churn out the work that is enough, right, for their client, right? So for example, right, now, with Instagram stories and all this, right, things will be there for less than 24 hours or 24 hours and then you'll be gone, right? There is no point for the client spend thousands and thousands of money just to come up with a IG story that's high quality, right? So in fact, most people will make do with phones and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But then if you're a creative, then you may be a bit not used to this
Perfectionist.
because you want, correct,
Perfectionist.
exactly, you want to put out your best work even if it's
Yeah.
just there for 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes the client will say, okay, tomorrow I need to go already, so you just need to give it to me. It doesn't matter whether it's not perfect, the color is not perfect, it's okay, I just need to print it out and then I just need to send it out. But as a creative, right? Sometimes if the color is not right, the color is not right, right? And you refuse to let go. You say, cannot, I must perfect before I pass it to you. So this is some of the compromise lah that I would say, between realistic business expectations, or I would say business needs lah, because they really doesn't need that high level of production quality, right? In some cases, it's just a communication tool for them, right? But whereas for the creative, right, maybe they always will find that you know uh the that there's some area where they cannot meet. So another example is like branding, right? So maybe for that particular design, the designer feel that the best color to use is yellow. But the client will say, no, I don't want to use yellow because my competitors is yellow, right? So I want you to use red, which is my branding colors, so things like that, right? So the reason why I bring that up was that's why we always enjoy working on our own project, and that's why we actually have so many things out there, right? Launching our own initiative, because those are the project, right, that we feel that we want to give the power, right, back to the freelancer so that they can actually focus or be empowered to do to test their creative boundary and do the things that they really want to do instead of having to compromise to some commercial terms, right? We still need to do commission project, definitely. I think everyone need to do, because
Mm.
that is what our bread butter, right? But
Yeah,
in
that's the
our
bread
free
butter.
time, yeah,
Yeah.
in our free time, right, we like to actually meddle into different things, right? So we have actually launched several initiatives. Actually, in fact, now we're still in the midst of one initiative called Bridge. So basically, Bridge is actually a project that we brought together where we actually provide funding supports to freelancers who actually have a very innovative idea through their creative storytelling to help a SME to promote themselves, a local small businesses lah, to promote themselves and to showcase themselves, right?
So is it
So
applicable to wait? Hang on. Is it applicable to Singaporean freelancers, or is it like across the world, across Malaysia, Asia?
yeah, I mean we are looking forward to actually have another one that is actually open up to the region, but currently firstly it has closed already,
Yeah.
and it's only for Singapore, and it's only applicable for Singapore freelancers lah, or at least freelancers based in Singapore, but the local small medium enterprises has to be a Singapore based incorporated company as well.
Ah,
So
I see.
basically Bridge actually has a few phase lah, right? So the first is we actually do a call out there, so we get freelancers to submit their idea to us, right? What they hope to do, what they hope to achieve, right? There's only two factors that we look into it, right? So it's upskilling. How will this allow the freelancers to work on a project that they would otherwise not have the opportunity to, right? So it's really to test their skills and to upskills themselves. Another one is who is the local businesses lah. So we really want to help the small businesses to profile themselves, especially people who don't do a lot of marketing, like your hawker centers, or your provision stores. I'm sure there's some interesting stories, right? So based on these two factors, we then select 30 freelancers or 30 projects. So we have already finished the selections already. The 30 projects are currently underway. Actually, in fact, we just launched one. If you go to our website, or sorry, if you go to our Facebook, right, you probably will see the first one that we just announced yesterday. So it's actually based on a, I can't remember the name now. I'm so sorry. We just launched it yesterday.
Yeah,
So
just
it's
go
based on
to
yeah, just go to
Creatives at Work Facebook page,
yeah,
and you'll find it
yeah.
there.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're going to
So,
release them as and when they finishes along the way.
okay.
So we selected 30 projects, right? Our hope is if we can actually demonstrate the viability of this model, then of course, we hope to have another run, and then we can actually then expand,
Open to
um,
other
open to
freelancers,
other freelancers, yeah, yeah,
not
in
just
the
in
region.
Singapore, lah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I
Open to
mean,
other.
even though we are based in Singapore, but
Yeah.
to be frank, we have actually been dealing with the region a lot more,
Yeah.
right? So while
Malaysia, Indonesia,
yes,
and all
we
that,
have
right?
freelancers, yeah, we have freelancers in Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, even Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
So I would say in Southeast Asia, we do have a good pool of freelancers. And even for our client projects, right, a lot of time it's actually never just meant for Singapore. I mean, Singapore is a small market, right? So what we do is always about this region. Right, it's always Singapore plus something else. Singapore plus Thailand, Singapore plus Indonesia, right? Singapore plus
Yeah.
Malaysia. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to learn to work together and collaborate, right? So for those
Yes.
of you who join us, right, welcome. I see some new names in the chat, so welcome. The other thing is, why we're very interested in Jayce's story. You can get her story when you go to my podcast. This session is just talking about the business side of things, but if you really want to go into how she started the media agency with her sister, who is a creative at heart, you should really check out podcast episode where I featured Jay. So you can go to womenprenneurasia.com and look out for her episode under season 3. So now back to a question. Shamila has a question for you. What are some examples of realistic goals freelancers can set for themselves apart from income goals?
Wow.
Good question, Sharmila.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's a very big question. Okay, so I would say there's actually different ways of doing it. I mean, or rather, we have seen different freelancers doing differently, right? I think the first thing to go back to is what is your do you actually already have a goal when you first want to start your freelance business, right? Because we do know that freelancers freelance for different reasons, right? There are some, right, that freelance because of their family commitments, right? There are some that freelance because they cannot work in an office structure, right? So, but of course there are some, right, that set up that want to go into their business because, right, they want to have to make money, for example, and to be their own boss, right? So I think first of all is to go back to your original goal of why you want to create that business or why you want to go into freelancing, right? And then from there, you can then come up with what I call the milestone goals, right? Because you also want to know whether you are moving towards the direction that you want to be, right? And then you set appropriate milestones to achieve, right? So of course, income is one, right? Another I would say is the happiness level, if you may, right? Are you happier, right? Of who you are, right? If you are actually not enjoying it, right, then I would say, why do you even want to do it? You might as well, go back to a full-time job and work for someone else if you are as miserable, right? So this is some of the things that you should look at. So um happiness level, right, is probably another what I call the milestone goals lah, right? Just to let Crystal know. So basically, I think you need to when you first started, right, think about why do you go into this freelance career, right? And then from there, you then distill it into milestones goal, right? Because every time you hit a milestone, then you should give yourself a pat on your back to say, hey, well done, I reached another milestone already.
Or
Rather
reward
than to
yourself.
actually
Or
exactly
reward
to reward
yourself.
yourself, yeah, rather than to set a goal that is so high, right? That is probably like 3 to 5 years later, right? You don't want to wait that long to actually give yourself a heart or to reward yourself, right? So you should set milestone goals, right? And then some of the realistic one is happiness level. I think is very important, right? Because actually, to be frank, most of the time, I would say 9 out of 10 times, right? When I ask my freelancers, how are you doing? Would you go back to full time job? Actually, to be frank, most of them would not want to do so, right? And then that you are this is the job for you lah, or you really want to do this, right? So apart from income, I would say your happiness level, right? And then of course there are certain smaller milestone, like every time I acquire one customers, right, I'll give myself a pet, right? That's a goal for me, right? That could be one as well. And then another example that I see is um revenue stream, right? I think that could also be another realistic goal as well, right? So rather than to because we always think about freelancers as provide, or at least for us, because as creative, right? The very straightforward is service-based business, or it will be a service-based business because you're providing a service to someone else, right? But I think a lot of time, as we look back and see some of our more successful freelancers, right? Actually, they don't only just have service as income, right? They are always doing many, many different things, right? So it's how you diversify your revenue streams. So that could be another goal as well that you set for yourself, right? So today you charge based on what you do, right? I give you a design and you pay me X dollars, right? This is the mode of exchange, right? A goal that you can set yourself is to move out of service-based business and to try out another model or another revenue stream, right? Another model could be, think about other than just being paid when I complete a job, can I turn it into subscription base, right? Can someone pay me X dollars every month on a regular basis? And then of course you have to figure out why they want to do that, what's the value and all this lah. But are you able to have multiple, I would say, model
Streams of
of
income.
making money and streams of income? Yeah,
Yeah.
actually I have freelancers, right, who are hosts, who are
Mm,
actor, who is
mm,
a social media manager, who is also a writer. There could be
mm.
so many uh different, I would say, scope of work
Areas.
that they provide
Yeah.
areas, yeah. But of course
Yeah.
this then goes into contrary of what we just discussed about niching down, right? But I would say this
Yeah.
is actually probably another way of running your business. So there's actually no right or wrong as long as it works for you, right? There will be
Yeah.
people who feel that I need to diversify, I need to provide as much services as I can because, in the event, right, if one goes down, I have the others, right? Actually, in fact, COVID is a very good case studies. I would say actually COVID, while it's unfortunate, but it has
Mm.
actually taught a lot of freelancers a lot of very good lessons. And those lessons, right, is something that you will not learn if you don't go through it yourself, right?
Yeah.
Of course, one of them is the emergency fund, right?
Mm.
Suddenly, a lot of my freelancers realize how important and how they wish they actually have set up emergency fund for themselves, or at least make some investment, right?
Yeah.
That will provide you regular income or revenue
Even when
stream
you're
in the
not
event
working, right?
even when you're not working, exactly, right? So these are some of the thought that never go through a freelancer's mind before COVID. They will always thought that there's always jobs, it's
There's always
okay,
something
right?
coming in,
There's always
right?
something coming in, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So this is one. Then another one is really revenue stream, right? Because we have seen how some sectors, for example, F&B, right? For example, events, right?
Mm.
Was really just shut down overnight, right? Just overnight, no flight coming in, no one is coming into your country, no one is allowed to go out. So those freelancers who are in those area really just overnight just suffer, right? And just
Yeah.
lost all their all their hope lah, in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So if you have multiple stream of income, right, then at least you know that okay, it's okay, right? Hopefully, yeah, hopefully your revenue stream is actually in
Mm.
different areas, right? So at least you still have two or three more to back you up, right?
Yeah.
So you don't feel so uh, uh you don't feel so sad, I would say, immediately, or you don't feel so dejected immediately.
Okay. So there's another question coming in from Usha. For a seasoned corporate person moving to freelancing, what are the new skills we need to acquire to better succeed in this field? Wow, this is a very, how should I say, this is a very big question also, right?
It is actually tonight's question are all very big question. It's not something that you can answer, right, with just one line. But I guess
Yeah.
that's what freelancing is all about, right? There's no right
Yeah.
or wrong. There's 1,000 ways. Every road will leads to Rome, kind of thing, right? But what I wanted to actually comment about this, right, is that actually for Isha, actually one of the things that we always tell our young freelancers is that, or rather not young freelancers lah, fresh graduates, right, is
Mm.
try to work for a while first before you turn into freelancing, because we feel that, or when we look at our freelance pool, right, usually the successful ones are usually the one that actually have corporate experience, right?
Mm.
Because you know the business world, you have the connections, and you probably are a little bit more mature, right? And you are able to um negotiate, you have better business sense, of course, not saying that the young fresh graduate doesn't have those, right? We do have outliers as well, right? We do have very successful freelancers, actually, in fact, couple of them, right? We saw them from in school, and then after they graduates, and then they went straight into freelancing, and then now they're all business owner. They set up design agency, they set up advertising agency, and then some of them flew to US, things like that. So of course there are outliers, but the bulk of it, I would say, we would prefer to work with freelancers who actually have some corporate experience, because they will deal with clients better, right? They understand
Mm.
certain issue better, right? So if going back to her question about then what are some of the new skills that those seasoned corporate person need to acquire, right, to better succeed in this field? Again, I'm not sure which specific area that you're talking about, but for us, when we look at our creative, I would say creative field, right?
Mm.
One of the key gap is really the business skill sets that a lot of the freelancers need to work on, right? It ranges from negotiating your rates, to marketing, for example, right? And in fact, I think one of the key challenges for a lot of the seasoned people, including myself, okay, is really understanding the social media platforms, right? And I say understanding not just whether you know how to use it, right? But really be at the what do you call that? Be at the forefront of it, right? Do you know what it takes to make a? I mean, although I hate to say this, but why would a viral video go viral, for example, right?
Mm.
Do you know what actually is the heartbeat in that sense, right? Of people. What are people talking about? Right? What are the trending topics nowadays? Right? How about analytics? Right? Are those some of the things that you understand and you can actually articulate convincingly to your clients, right? And convince them why you are the best person to do this instead of, you know, uh, someone who is much younger than you, right? Because one of the question, or rather one of the common question that we always hear, right,
Mm,
from our customers, especially those who are looking to engage social
mm,
media manager or specialist, right?
yeah.
So unfortunately they will always say, hey, you know, okay, it's not about discriminating or what, right? But obviously, if they look at the certain age group, then they will say that, hey, you sure this person can do social media? Because we always have this at the back of our mind, right? Like, for example, TikTok, right? TikTok is always a young people thing, right? Are you sure you can do it if you're above a certain age? That kind
Yeah.
of I would say that kind of stereotype like in that sense.
Yeah.
So in order to overcome these discussions, then you really need to know how to actually articulate it at the best business sense to your clients and convince them why you're the best person. So these are some of the areas that we see the more seasoned or more mature freelancers in that sense need to actually build on, right? Really your understanding of social media, understanding of what young people do nowadays, right? Because chances are when you work with a client, right, you don't work for them as per se. It's always about their customers, right? And most of the time their customers are probably youth, right? Are probably young people, right? So then how do you convince them that you know the young people? Right. So this is some of the, I would say, peripheral skill sets that you need to build on, so that you are able to tell a story more convincingly. So at the end of the day, everything is about telling a story, right? How do you piece all the different pieces and the different experience that you have, the different skill sets that you have, and make it into a story that you can convince someone that you are the best person to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Hope that answers your question, Usha. But I think for a seasoned corporate person, you already come with a lot of very good skill sets, right? I mean, you've been there, you've done that. And actually, as a little side note, Jayce herself comes from the corporate world. Jayce herself has that part of her, but she transitioned very well into being a media agency owner with her sister. So that's also another side of Jayce, right? Like you said, you brought in your own business development skills
Yeah, so
into your
I
business.
exactly, and thank you for raising that, right? And I would really attribute it to my experience in the corporate world, right? Because if I don't have that 10, 12 years of experience, working in a corporate world, I wouldn't have built out that, connection space. I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing today, right? It is a advantage, I would say,
Yeah.
for business owner, for freelancers, right? But I think there are also some other skill sets that we can actually pick up along the way. So for example, for myself, I really do pick up social media a lot. I used to be a very quiet person in that sense
Mm.
when I was corporate, or
Low
rather I don't
profile,
see the
low
need, like,
profile.
yeah, low profile, right? And also back then, LinkedIn is really not a thing, and you don't
Yeah.
really need, right, to
Yeah.
have that. But fast forward to today, right? If you were to go to my LinkedIn profile, you would have seen that I'm actually a little bit more active, a little bit more open to talk about the things that represent us lah, in that sense. So I guess that's something that I learned as well over the last 7 to 9 years of running the business.
Okay. There's a question from Wavern, but I think we answered this. I think maybe she joined us late.
Mm.
Anxiety management when the usual paycheck doesn't come in the first few months. We answered this, Wavern, but anyway, Jace can uh,
Okay,
summarize a little bit.
actually we can broaden it as well lah, right? I think
Yeah.
earlier when we touched on this, right, we actually kind of just very briefly talk about managing the money and the cash flow side, right? So I mean, just to let we will know, the summary was really, when you first start freelancing, you already know the challenges that you are exposed to, or you're going to face, right? And this question about paycheck doesn't come in the first few months is something that is applicable
It's
to
common, right?
everyone. Yes,
It's
it's
common, right?
common, and I would say it's normal, right?
Yeah.
Unless you already. But I do have some freelancers who are freelancing even when they're working, right? So they already have a few customers, right? And then after that they started full-time freelancing, then they already have a stable pool of clients lah. So I think that's a different story. But if you start from nothing, then
Yeah.
you will face this, right? Because paycheck really doesn't come in, right? So I think we talk about the emergency funding, right? Ensure that you have at least 6 to 8 months of emergency fund to take care of situation like this, right? But I guess emergency fund is just one of the many things you need to prepare yourself for. But the idea, the gist of it is that, right? You already know that as a freelance business owner, you will be faced with many challenges, right? So even before you actually start the career, you should already anticipate those challenges and try to minimize those challenges, right? Create opportunity that you will, or rather create solutions, right? That you will be able to survive those challenges, right? So that's really the idea of it lah. If you know that, okay, you have a minimum level of services or payment that you need to pay on a minimum level, then you have to make sure that you have enough to cover those minimum level. But I guess Wei Wen's question about anxiety management is even broader, right? So money is one thing that you need to consider, right? Bring in enough customers to survive is actually another issue as well, right? So you may have one customer this month and the next month you doesn't have, and then the following month you don't have, right? So I mean, and this is common as well. As freelancers, we go through all the ups and downs, right? Because we are just one person. We do we while we are working, then we usually fall back on marketing, right? So hence I think a good way to actually kind of like smoothen this up and down, right? Like when we are working, we have no time for marketing and all this, right? It's really to then build out on your personal branding, right? Because that is where, we were talking about the concept of how do I look for clients versus where do I find my clients, right? Sorry, or rather the concept of where do I find my client versus can the client find me, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is where the personal branding comes in. If you build up a social media presence, right? If you are able to actually get people to know about you without you doing anything, right? That's what social media is all about, right? It kind of attract them to you, right? So hopefully that will kind of help you to smoothen, right, your up and down and make them more level and stable,
Yeah.
right? And then I think we also talk about the multiple stream of income.
Yeah.
I think this is where it also help in terms of the anxiety management, because you know that there's different I mean, actually even this thing is something that we are working very hard ourselves as well. That's why we started our original content creations. That's why it seems like we're doing so many things, right? But we are testing the different model of revenues, right? And different revenue streams, like hopefully that we can have different revenue stream coming from different services, right? That probably will help in terms of the anxiety management. One last thing is something that we talked about recently in our Creative at Work's lunchtime session as well. So we actually also run this once a quarter, called the Creative at Work's lunchtime sessions. Then Crystal was actually one of our guests for our last quarter session as well, where we actually invite 10 different guests to actually share with us their experience and to talk about, a specific theme for 5 minutes. So we invite 10 guests and then each one of them talk about 5 minutes. So the last one that we talk about is actually on mental health, right? It's creative
Mm.
versus mental health, right? So
Yeah.
what some of our speakers actually kind of bring up, right, is that first of all, you need to acknowledge this, right? So I think it's good that we won't brought this up. So you already acknowledge that, there's going to be anxiety, right? Then the next step is then recognizing it, right? Acknowledge it, and then look for ways, right, to overcome it. Right, what caused the anxiety? So I think that's the question that you want to ask yourself. So if the anxiety is really caused by the different paycheck that doesn't come in the first few months, right? Then I would say you don't start going into freelancing first, right? Ensure that you have enough buffer to overcome that first few months, right? Or you start taking freelance assignment first, build up a stable pool of clientele before you then say, okay, I will go into full-time freelancing, right? That could
Yeah.
be a part-time, type of arrangement as well. So there's actually different ways of doing it and different people will do it differently, right? So that's what I would actually suggest, right, in terms of treating the anxiety. Actually, in fact, I think freelancing is one of the most high stress job, right? So mental
It should
wellness,
be, right? It
anxiety, yeah,
should be,
it
right?
should be. Yes, correct.
Because it's
Yeah,
like so much, especially in the creative field, because you're really using your brains to think of the best concept, the best ideas, the best design, the best output. right? And at the same time, you really have to make sure that you yourself are in the best mental state to produce that. Otherwise,
Yep.
you come up with something that which is not going to be consistent work.
Yep. Yep.
It's like it
Exactly.
really is spiral out, right? Spiral out
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
it
so
is.
you want to give yourself the mental space, right, to do the work that you really want to do, right, rather than to focus on things that actually,
Distract you.
that distract you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, so we are at the top of the hour. So all of you who are watching, if you want to ask your question, this is the last chance to ask your question. If not, you can ask your questions when you go and connect with Jayce on LinkedIn or even on their Facebook page, right? So one of the things that before we end, Jayce, any any final takeaways before we end this session together?
Well, okay, so I would say that I think over the last 1 hour, I think we have talked about nothing but challenges that freelancers face, right? Like,
So sad, all right?
it's, yeah,
As if
you make it like
freelancing is
it's
all about
yeah,
challenges.
yeah, or about things that will cause anxiety,
Yeah,
or about things that we need to put in so much effort, from
yeah,
talking about how much we are worth to our value to our personal branding. But at the end of the day, I think my last point, right, is really that even though freelancing is a challenging career, right, but I can assure you that most of the freelancers who actually overcome the first few months, right,
mm,
and if they look back, right, it's actually just a very small part of their freelance career, right? So
mm,
um, you will actually enjoy it much more than you believe, right? That you want to believe, right? So it is a journey. So whether or not it turns out to be a career for you, right? I would say that as long as you want to try, right, I think you should just do it. So for example, for myself, right, actually, to be frank, if you ask me, would I want to go back to a full-time job? My answer, I don't even need to think about it. My answer is no, I don't want, right? Because I really enjoy what I'm doing now, right? The power of creation is so satisfying and so fulfilling that you will never be able to get it from anywhere else, right? So for anyone who want to try, right, even if it's, even if it's just for 1 year, 2 years, right, I would say, just do it, right? Just give yourself that opportunity, right? While you hear from us all the challenges, but at the end of the day, if you manage to cross it, if you manage to overcome the challenges, I would say, the self satisfaction that you have in yourself, right, and the confident level that you have built, nothing will beat that.
yeah, that is very well said. So, Q Hong Chia says ditto. Yes, right, definitely. And of course, Sharmila said thank you for support. Yes, one of the things that I always believe is that when once you are into whether you call it freelancing, the gig economy, or whether you're just doing it for yourself, I think the like you said, the power of creation, the ability to wake up today and say, "Hey, what I'm going to create today? Shall I create this or shall I create this other thing?" And those are the things, and also the freedom, right? The freedom to work on what you want to work on. And what you've just shared with us in this 1 hour is also interesting because one of the things that maybe people don't really think so much about is the multiple streams of income that even as freelancers, even as business owners, that we should all be looking at, where it's not just providing a service, and most, of course, creative people are providing services, but they can also provide products and other things, like you said, membership, subscription based, right? But how they do it, of course, they have to put put on their thinking caps. It's not going to be a very easy, straightforward answer, but at least you know that in order to sustain yourself and make it profitable for yourself, it's not just that one thing that you do when you start out, and that's the thing you do for the rest of your life. Yeah. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us here tonight. Let us know. Okay, this is the other thing I also want to know. I used to have these sessions on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. And then now I switch it to Thursday nights, 9 p.m. because I figured since all of us are like now out and about, right? Those of us who are double vax and all that, out and about. Saturdays are just days that you're going to go out and do some other stuff rather than sit around and watch live streams, no matter how interesting they are. So I understand that. So let me know if Thursday nights, 9 p.m. is also a good time, because I think there's also a time when most people are at home if you're not out and about. So that's just something for us to know so that we can really improve the value that we bring to the people who watch our shows. So thank you so much, Jayce. Where can people connect with you?
Well, okay, I'm on LinkedIn, right?
Mm.
And if they Google Creatives at Work, I'm sure they can find us on our website. We are on all social media platforms. From your LinkedIn. We also have a TikTok account, by the way. We also run TikTok
I was
channels.
gonna watch your
Yeah,
TikTok.
yeah, thank you. But it's more educational content. It's again, it's about freelancing, like, yeah. So, yeah, so I think we are almost on all social media platforms, I would say, right? So just go and Google about us, drop us an email, even go to LinkedIn, connect with me personally, or connect with Creative at Works, right? And then check out our podcast called the Freelance Creative Exchange. It's also on all audio podcast channels, from your Spotify to your Google Podcasts to your iTunes. Yeah.
Okay. So you see, you can find Jayce on all these different platforms, and the best thing is, once you connect with her, I mean, who knows? Maybe there's potential for future business together and to
Yep.
do good things between Malaysia and Singapore.
Definitely, always happy to do that. I mean, let's do something. I guess the key words now is really collaborations, right? I
Yeah.
mean, no one is too small or too big to do anything, right? So, we are always looking for opportunities to collaborate with our fellow freelancers from the regions, right? And always looking for interesting project to work together. So, if you have any interesting project, or you like to work with us, right, just reach out to us and just find us.
Yeah. And a couple more comments. Thank you. Thanks. She says, thanks for insightful sharing. And thank you, Usha. Nice ending advice, Jace.
I'm glad you like it.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We will call it a night and we will see you in 2 weeks' time. And in 2 weeks' time, I think we'll be talking about how to network better. So I'm going to bring on a very interesting guest. Actually, going to talk about this thing about making connections. So thank you once more, everyone. Have a very good evening.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you. Bye.